Issues around the recently passed petroleum industry bill remain very topical and is the starting point of my conversation with the chairman of the NBA section on business law. A highly regarded corporate and commercial lawyer, Jemide was named the best lawyer in Nigeria 2013 by World Finance. He specializes in project finance, real estate, oil and gas, and public-private partnerships, to mention a few. I began the interview by asking his views on the PIB law.
Well, I mean, it was a very important bill, and the stakes were really high, because this is a bill that's trying to readdress, imbalances in the oil and gas sector. I think that the oil and gas companies would be against the bill, naturally, but national interest really trumps, in the sense that this bill, if passed and well operated, is a bill that is really in the national interest.
Some oil and gas experts have described the PIB as a necessary legislation, but they think that it's coming a little too late for it to have any meaningful impact, especially because the world is moving away from fossil fuel. Do you share this view?
I agree with you that they're moving. So it's a journey. Now, whether that journey, will terminate early or it will materialize to a point where oil will become irrelevant in the next 1, 2, 3, 10, 20 years, my view is that, oil will still be around for a long time to come. I mean, just think about it. There are over 1 billion passenger vehicles in the world, just passenger vehicles, right? It will take a while to transit. Think about the fact that there are probably over 70% of the world is undeveloped, right? So for a long time, right, people will still be transported with vehicles that need, the traditional energy, right? So, I mean, it will take a while. One of the ways to track thoughts is to find out what the investors are doing. Shell and the IOCs are renewing their oil mining leases. As of 2021, I think in May, Shell was renewing OML 118. I mean, if they thought that in 20 years, this industry will be dead, they'll be moving elsewhere.
Now let's talk about some of the controversies that are trailing the recently passed bill. Some major oil companies in Nigeria are complaining about taxes and royalties, and there's also the pushback against the right percentage due to host communities. How will you advise the National Assembly to handle these issues going forward?
Okay, so those are really two different things, and they are two conflicting things, right? Because traditionally, the fight of the host community and what the IOCs want have always been askew, right? So let's talk about the IOCs, right? And let's tell ourselves the truth, right? The IOCs have held Nigeria hostage when it comes to the oil and gas industry for God knows how many years, right? Do we know how much they spend to drill 1 barrel of oil? Do we know if the IOCs are already making a profit based on the contribution of government to the JV? We don't really know the stats, right? Do we know, if there are any monies that are unaccounted for? Recently, we had, issues where the government was saying, there were things unaccounted for, right? I don't know whether it's right or wrong, but, there's no smoke without a fire, right? So the bottom line is, I think the PIB, if well implemented, is coming to address this, right? And like I said earlier on, the PIB is really in the national interest. And, we should focus on that. The bottom line is, we have major players in the oil and gas industry, the multinationals and the IOCs, but there are more people. And if you look recently, you'll find that Nigerian companies who took over oil mining leases from the IOCs have run their OMLs and have increased production. If you look at OML 29, they increased production from 30,000 to 70,000 and above. So at the end of the day, the government has to make up its mind whether it wants to stay with the national interest, and they have to be brave and courageous about this, because if the IOCs decide that the fiscal regime is not, favorable to them, they have an option, and we'll always get people who will invest in Nigeria. I'm definite about that.
Now, there's an ongoing dispute as to how much profits is due to the host communities. What are your thoughts on that?
First and foremost, I must tell you I'm conflicted. I'm from the Niger Delta. I'm from Warri North, and my community produces, a lot of oil, But that said, the genesis of this is that, the committee drafting the PIB first recommended 10%. The plenary session said no, 3%. Senator James Manager and the other senators from the Niger Delta tried to rally around to say, okay, maybe 5%. But I think we're at 3%, right? 3% is a lot of money. Even 1% is, right? And if you ask me, as someone from the Niger Delta, I will tell you 50%. I will tell you all of the money. But that said, I think beyond that, we should think about the implementation, even if it's 1% or 0.5%.
So for you, it's not about the
figure? Well, the figure is important, right? But, going beyond the figure, right, we should also think about the implementation. And the first question you ask yourself is whether derivation, since it was introduced, has really improved a lot of the community. We have the NDDC, the Niger Delta Development Commission. I mean, can we really say that, in the number of years NDDC has been in operation, and before that on PADEC, can communities say they have benefited, or is it a few people that got rich, right? So we should think about that. But there has to be a structure where we are sure that this money really helps to uplift the community, not to make a few people rich. It's something we need to monitor closely, and it's something that needs to be implemented properly, or else what was meant for good may end up for bad.
So I hear you saying, if well implemented. So I'm going to ask, what are your suggestions for implementation?
I always maintain that leadership is key. If you ask me to invest in a company, I will ask you, who are the shareholders? Who's the CEO? So they've set up all these commissions under the PIB, right? The important thing is to get the right people, who have the right mindset and who not only have the capacity to do the job, but, have the right vision and the right attitude, right? And if you get those kind of people, they'll get the job done.
Away from the issue of the PIB, the National Assembly on Wednesday empowered the executive to borrow some billions to fund the 2021 appropriation bill amid serious concerns from Nigerians about sustainability and servicing of Nigeria's external borrowing. These fears, as expressed by the public, do you think they're justified?
Debt by itself is not really a bad thing, right? First and foremost, sometimes it's cheaper to borrow than to generate revenue. If you think about how much the Federal Inland Revenue Service will spend on overheads alone and how well they've generated revenue, it will just put it in context for you. The other thing we need to think about is that when people think about debt, particularly if it's something like sovereign bonds, right, they only know the total number that was borrowed, right? But they don't understand that what you need to service the debt over the next 20 years is just to pay the coupons, right? So we shouldn't be worried about paying the coupons. Nigeria will pay the coupons. What we should be worried about is whether we would have enough fiscal responsibility to have a sinking fund where, you know, we put money aside to pay the principal when it becomes due in 20 years or however the tenure is, you know. And the last thing I would say is, for countries who borrow, the most important thing is the debt to GDP ratio, right? And when you think about it, even though we've borrowed a lot, we are not bad in terms of a debt to GDP ratio. We're not bad, right? Typical, economists will tell you that your debt to GDP ratio should stay somewhere around 60%, right? It should be below 60%, right? We're below 60%. I think we're in the 30s, right? But let's take a comparative look. You would find out that America is above 100%. Japan has the highest. They are over 200. And you wouldn't say Japan is doing badly, right? The most important thing is, what do we do with the money? If you put the money into productive activity that generates employment, rather than using it to pay salaries, right, then we'll be fine.
Leveraging the tech explosion is the theme of this year's NBA SBL conference, and the SBL conference have always been very popular. So let's talk about how tech is affecting the world of lawyers.
It's a conference that we've designed for non-lawyers to attend, and it's also a conference that we've designed this time around for lawyers to sit and listen. Because many times we come to these conferences and we speak to ourselves. But this time around we want to sit and let people talk, and we can learn. So there's a session about technology and legal practice, as one of the sessions. And we think that in the years to come, and it's already beginning to happen, artificial intelligence is something that's going to affect the income of lawyers. We also think that lawyers will be able to leverage on new networking tools, which are also based on artificial intelligence. If you notice, when you do a Google search, or you check for something on Instagram, the next couple of days you start getting advertisements targeted at that thing that you looked for, right? So there's a lot of artificial intelligence being developed that will help lawyers even with their networking and attracting clients and knowing the clients that are interested or clients that are in a particular line of business. So that's one aspect of it. We also think that lawyers will get more efficient. Technology is moving at a fast pace, and at a point in time, the agreements that used to take us, hours and days to put together, we'll be able to do it faster. We naturally assume that if we can, then perhaps the bills to the client should reduce. And if the bills reduce, we naturally assume that more people will have access to legal services. So you will get more clients on the curve rather than a few clients who pay you a lot, right? So there's a lot going around the technology and legal practice, and it's one of the things we want to discuss at this conference.
Finally, I want to put something in here for the young lawyers. A few days ago, the law school results were released, and we're going to have a couple of thousand more lawyers coming to the field. Where do you think that these lawyers will fit? And what advice do you have for young lawyers generally?
Well, thank you. I mean, that's a very good question, because there's always this debate as to whether we have too many lawyers in Nigeria. And I always maintain that no, we don't have too many lawyers. We just have too many people who think they don't need lawyers or don't know how to use lawyers. And then we have too many lawyers doing the same thing, right? So, on that basis, my advice to younger lawyers is, broaden your horizons, take a wider view about law than many of us did, right? There are new areas coming up in law. Technology and financial inclusion it's a new area. Lawyers who are focused on things like agriculture, healthcare, you know, in such a way that, you know, people who are involved with agriculture just know that this is your specialty. You know, some of those people don't exist. The key question is, what are you going to be known for at the end of the day, in 5 years, 10 years, 12 years, 15 years? What are you going to be known for? Are you going to be referred to as someone who is a lawyer, or are you going to be referred to as someone who is a lawyer that has a given expertise and you are known for that? And I think that's where every single lawyer should be headed.